Hi, this is Tiffany Linfield, and I'm here to talk about the distinction between guilt and shame. This is an important distinction to make, especially when we're talking about overall wellness, because whereas guilt invites empowerment and connection, shame invites deterioration and disconnection. So let's kind of get into that. Guilt is focused on behavior. Guilt will say something to the effect of, I did something wrong. I made a mistake. Shame, on the other hand, is focusing on identity. It makes a whole core value assessment. If guilt says, I did something wrong, I made a mistake, shame will say, I am wrong. I am the mistake. So there's a big difference there. And because guilt focuses on a specific behavior, it preserves agency and self-worth, which promotes the capacity for change. Shame, by contrast, undermines agency and self-worth, which leads to hiding, withdrawal, defensiveness, which decreases the motivation for change. Also, because shame is not behaviorally focused, even if one does not engage in a negative behavior worth changing, shame can still be triggered. For example, let's invent an imaginary character. We'll call him Marlin. Marlin goes to a small gathering with friends. During the evening, one person is distracted because of something personal they're dealing with. Another friend cancels at the last minute, and so conversation just kind of falls flat. Nothing overtly goes wrong, but the energy just kind of feels off. A person prone to shame may assume the night went badly because of them. They'll think things like, I killed the vibe, or if I weren't there, it would have been better. So rather than seeing the situation as a mix of circumstances, they'll internalize it as evidence that their very presence is the problem. So that was a lot. Let's kind of break it down in chunks. Guilt focuses on behavior, preserves agency and capacity for change, leads to repair, apology, and growth. Guilt strengthens values, personal values, and healthy relationships. Shame focuses on identity and core self-assessment, produces statements like, I am wrong, I am bad, I am the problem. It undermines agency and self-worth. It leads to hiding, withdrawal, defensiveness, and anger. It corrodes motivation and, worse, connection. So let's take a moment to look at how these states, the state of guilt and the state of shame, show up in the context of interpersonal relationships more closely. Interpersonal meaning involving others. We've all had interpersonal conflict. It's a part of life. Some people, when they cause harm, can quickly move into a state of guilt. They can acknowledge the problem behavior, they can offer an apology, and engage in repair. This leads to reconnection, and it feels so relieving to the person harmed. Someone causes hurt, but they own it, repair it, and the relationship grows stronger as a result. Now consider the opposite scenario. Someone causes harm, but they're unable to acknowledge it because it touches their shame. They become defensive, hide, deflect. No repair happens. Trust erodes. The relationship destabilizes and disconnection follows. This causes pain for everyone involved. So this is how shame doesn't just operate internally. It manifests in our relationships. It stirs internally, but it spills over into our external world. So let's go a bit deeper into why shame hides. We've talked about how guilt leads to repair and growth, shame leads to the hiding and the withdrawal. But again, why does shame hide? Because shame is a very vulnerable, private pain. So for the rest of this clip, I'm going to use a framework for shame that I find very helpful. I'm going to refer to shame as a button. Some people have a few buttons, some have large chronic automatic buttons, meaning some people are living lives of chronic automatic shame. Either way, everyone has a few buttons here and there. A button is something about yourself that creates shame, something you're unlikely to share openly. A button is a point of shame, something that makes you feel defective in a way, feel odd, strange, different, exposed, inadequate. And people generally only share these buttons with very trusted people because shame is, again, deeply personal and creates a significant amount of vulnerability. That is why guilt is so much easier to bring to the table. With guilt, you're bringing a behavior to the table. With shame, you're bringing a piece of yourself that is not flattering to the table. You're bringing an exposure of yourself. So let's talk about ways that shame commonly shows up. Self-criticism. And if you're dealing with a chronic state of shame, it'll be a chronic self-critic inside. Avoidance, procrastination, emotional shutdown, perfectionism, defensiveness, anger, people-pleasing, chronic subservience, a persistent fear of being exposed, of being found out. The mask slipping off, so to speak. Like, what if someone finds out who I really am? That kind of fear. So let's look at just like a few of those examples, expand them a little. Let's look at procrastination. Say, let's come up with another imaginary character, Dave. Say Dave sees a job posted that he genuinely wants, he has the credentials and the experience for, but a shame button may be pressed that says within him, you're not capable of managing this job, you're incompetent, you just don't have the abilities. So instead of applying, he listens to that shame button. Procrastination sets in, avoidance follows. So that's kind of an example. Let's look at perfectionism. Many of us spend a great deal of time presenting an image of ourselves having everything together and perfect on the outside just to keep others from seeing those buttons underneath. So let's look at some causes. We've kind of broken down how it presents, how it affects relationships, what causes shame. Babies aren't born shameful. They come out, they're definitely not shameful. They just, if you've ever seen toddlers running around, there's no shame in their game. So what causes this shame? Repeated criticism, contempt, or humiliation, such as being bullied in school or workplace harassment. Conditional love. For example, say a parent only shows love to a child when they excel in school or excel in a particular sport. Interpersonal trauma, such as abusive relationships, marriages, friendships, etc. Also, cultural, religious, or social systems that emphasize punishment without repair, such as religious foundations that emphasize the concept of hell. In simpler terms, shame often develops through negative interpersonal and intrapersonal interactions. Interpersonal meaning how interpersonal interactions involve how others treat us, while intrapersonal interactions involve how we treat ourselves internally. So when these interactions are persistent, especially when they occur in childhood, shame can become internalized and automatic. When shame is chronic and automatic, therapy or meaningful intervention is usually warranted. But even with a few buttons, I think intervention is still valuable. Shame is not something we need to carry at all. Let me repeat, we do not need to carry one single button of shame. So if negative interactions, especially interpersonal ones, are the gateway into shame, then positive interpersonal interactions are the gateway out. That's why healing shame often requires relationships with others who are capable of compassion and acceptance. People who can hold accountability for us without punishment. Let me repeat this clearly. Shame cannot live in the same space as compassion, as care, as love. Love kills shame. Compassion, care, kindness kills shame. So let's kind of double click on that last statement. It is common to find those that are living in chronic states of shame to be without these compassionate relationships in their lives. That means we must be very intentional about the relationships we make space for. If we hold on to demeaning relationships, there is little room left for healing ones. The energy we place into managing painful relationships can be the same energy we place into nurturing positive relationships. So it's very important to think of that. Also, we have to evaluate the relationship we make with ourselves. Our relationships with others and ourselves is the difference between states of shame or states of empowerment. So, with that said, let's look briefly at some ways to combat and untangle shame. You can take these ideas and expand upon them with self-work or work with a trusted professional or friend. One way, learn to separate behavior from identity. Name what happened, not who you are. For example, I forgot to put the check in the bank. Rather than, I'm incompetent and I'm always forgetting everything. So every time you catch yourself making global assessments of yourself, stop. Name the behavior. Separate the behavior from the identity. Secondly, when you feel a button getting pressed, a shame button, stop and forcefully name shame explicitly. This is shame, not truth. And give yourself that compassion, that self-compassion. Thirdly, try to shift from punishment to accountability, focusing on repair and learning. We often feel the need to punish ourselves or others when mistakes are made, but it is better psychologically to offer that space for repair. For example, say you miss a friend's birthday. Instead of punishing yourself with a lot of self-criticism, focus that energy on how to offer a belated birthday surprise instead. Basically, a way to practice self-compassion without punishment and also solution focus. So instead of getting stuck in, oh God, you messed up again, look at you, you're moving into, okay, behavior can be modified. I can use the energy that I'm using to berate myself into solving the problem. And lastly, and I talked on this earlier, but I'm going to say it again because it's so important, bringing that shame into a safe connection with a trusted, compassionate person. This is one of the most powerful ways to break apart shame. You can envision handing a button of your shame that you carry and placing it in the hand of someone compassionate. That button will melt in the hand of someone offering that care and compassion. It will disintegrate. So this was a lot. I want to try to give an example that kind of puts it all together. A benign one, but I hope one that truly illustrates the context. Let's spend a moment with a made-up character. We're going to call her Jessica. Jessica went to a friend's house and she talked up how great her cookies were, and she made a big batch of cookies at this friend's house. Everyone is getting excited, but when Jessica opens the stove door, the cookies are burnt to a crisp, ruining the cookies and the cooking pan. A button is pressed inside Jessica. She immediately feels transported back to childhood with an internal voice saying, "You never do anything right. You're stupid." This is shame, not truth. She pauses. She names it. This is shame, not truth. The truth was simple. She wasn't familiar with the oven. Everyone had gotten distracted in conversation, and she made a minor mistake. A mistake, but a minor one, by not checking the oven. She wasn't bad. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't incompetent. After naming this, she moved into repair. She began cleaning up the mess, made apologies for no cookies and a burned pan. Her friends helped her clean and offered compassion rather than judgment. Her button was dislodged. Everybody laughed it off. It's a simple example, I know, but one that reminds us that we don't have to live in chronic shame or shame. We can bring these buttons into safe relationships, shift our language toward ourselves to be words of compassion, and move toward empowerment and connection rather than degradation and disconnection. So I really appreciate you joining me for this talk, and my wish is that we all live a life free of buttons.